Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Infinite Logins YouTube channel. So I've made a few videos already on LLMNR, but every video I've made so far has been on using Responder or using Kali Linux to be able to perform the attack. And I was recently just on an engagement where I couldn't use Kali. I had to use Windows. So it made me kind of have to think on my toes a bit, and I found this tool that is similar to Responder, and it's able to perform LLMNR poisoning attacks using PowerShell, and it's called Inveigh. So we're going to dive into this one, and I hope you learn something new. Okay, so before we go too far, I do appreciate you being here. Feel free to hit the like button if you enjoy this type of content, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But I made this blog post that kind of outlines everything we're going to do today. And if you wanted to check this out, this will be in the description. It allows you to just kind of copy and paste the commands we're going to run. But basically, we have two different machines we're going to be using. So this is our attack perspective. And then over here, we've got the victim perspective. And this is just going to simulate two machines that are part of the same Active Directory environment on the same network. But we'll go ahead and move the victim away for now. Let's just focus in on this attacker. So the first thing we need to do is go out and actually download the tool we're going to use. And I believe I already have it in I put it in an op directory. Obviously, it's just because I'm used to Linux a bit. But this tool right here, Inveigh, is what we're going to want to use. If you have Git Bash installed for Windows, then you could easily download this tool by just running this Git Bash, and then you would just run git clone, and then you would copy. If you go up to the Inveigh GitHub, which you can find on Google, or you can use the link in my blog post, you can just copy this right here, and with that copied, you can come in and you could say git clone, paste that link in, press enter, and that's going to download this Inveigh folder that's got everything that we need inside of it. So once you have the tool downloaded, it's pretty simple to get up and running. We're just going to open up PowerShell as an administrator, and then I'm just going to real quick change into this directory. Cool. And I like to just come here to make sure I don't mess anything up. The first thing we want to do is set our execution policy to remote signed. You may not need to do this if you've done it before. I'm just going to go ahead and do it just in case. This just allows you to use basically scripts that were written from somebody else on the internet, and they're not signed officially, they're signed remotely, right? So we're going to set our execution policy to that. And then we're going to import this Inveigh module. And because we're in the same directory as that module as this PSD file, then we're able to run that command just fine. But by importing that module, we're now able to do stuff like invoke Inveigh. And notice how I just used tab autocomplete. So that shows that, yep, that's it's a valid function, it's a valid module here, and we're actually able to use this command now. Whereas if you don't run this, you won't be able to actually run that command later. So this is also just saying if you wanted to, this might work for you where you can just basically download the PSD file from the internet and execute it directly into memory, keeping you from ever having to download anything onto the disk. That might help you with like AV evasion, or if you're worried about leaving a trace behind, this could be useful because you don't actually have to download files on your target. But anyway, we'll just move on here. So at this point, we should actually be ready to start our PowerShell session, start our listener on the network. What we're going to do first is just kind of simulate what we would do with like Responder and Kali Linux. We're just going to listen on the network for any LLMNR broadcast. We can also have it listen for any DNS-related broadcasts. And it's going to try to respond to those and say, hey, I'm what you're looking for. Send me your hash to make sure that you have access to view me, right? So if that sounds new to you, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out some of my other videos. I think the part 1 of my LLMNR series probably goes into the most detail about that attack. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. But I'm just going to copy this command here. We'll just clear out everything. And let's paste this in. And it didn't like something. Let's see, operators resolved for future use. Oh, it doesn't like the attacker IP, right? Because that's just a placeholder. So let's rerun this again. And you may not actually need to specify this IP flag. I like to use it because on the engagement I was on, I had multiple network interfaces, and I wanted to make sure I was listening on the right one. So if you just do a quick IP config, you can find out what your IP address is, copy that down, and then replace that here in this placeholder. Okay, by adding this console output of y, what it's going to do is it's going to allow the output of our command to just display right here in the console for us. It doesn't do that by default, and I like to add that into my command so I can kind of watch stuff as it happens across the network. So I'm going to hit enter on this. You might see some traffic because it's actually listening now for any broadcast on the network. I do have some like Google Homes and stuff like that on my network, so we may see some broadcasts related to that. Hopefully it won't be anything too sensitive. Yeah, we totally have some Google related broadcasts here. But anyway, if we keep moving on, at this point, we now have the ability to run any of these 4 commands. So like if I were to press any key, it's going to stop that real-time output like I was talking about earlier. And I can just kind of clear all this stuff out for a second. And then we can actually run these different commands. And I don't want to clear this. This will clear out the hash table. So let's say while Inveigh was running, and it's still actually running in the background, we're just not seeing the output live. But if it's able to capture a hash, then we can run this get Inveigh commandlet to pull down the hash. And I think you actually have to add this NTLM v2 flag to pull down any of the NTLM v2 hashes. And we just don't have any yet. If we had some, we could use clear to clear that table, right? The other one that's useful to know is the stop Inveigh. That's going to stop the command. Like I mentioned, it's still running in the background. We're just not seeing it. And then watch Inveigh will allow us to start seeing the output live again. So if I press that, it says press any key to stop. And if we wait a second, we'll probably start to see some more of those Google Home broadcasts and whatever. But I don't care about seeing those, so I'm just going to stop it. Okay, so let's move on to actually doing something cool and helpful out of this, right? And yeah, I mean, we might as well watch the output here so we can see if we can capture a hash. So now if we go to our victim machine, this guy right there, we could simulate. I mean, if we waited long enough, we're probably going to end up capturing something just because computers on their own like to do stuff that triggers these events. But one example, let's see if anything here. Yeah, it's just all Google Home related stuff. But if I were to right click and run and try to browse to like a fake file share that doesn't exist, and I press enter on this, we should see, check this out. Okay, so we got a ton of stuff that's happening. I'm going to stop the output for a second and let's just see if we can kind of go through it. Now, granted, it's kind of hard to read because I've got the font so big, but it's saying that we've got this request here for an NBA machine 10.0.1.11. Let's just see what my IP address is. Yep, 10.0.1.11. So it definitely saw a request from this 10.0.1.11 machine. And I'm not seeing like a hash that got passed over. Let's see, we've got the SYN packet, we've got a TCP. Yeah, I'm not actually seeing anything, but let's see if we can run this get Inveigh and do an NTLM v2 flag, and we're still not getting anything out of this. So let's just go ahead and let's clear everything out. And I'm going to go ahead and say watch Inveigh again. Oh, we just didn't wait long enough. So it's right there. The handshake was going on. I just stopped the output before we actually received that hash. But right here, now if I were to stop the output, we see this K Bryant hash that got sent over. And then again, let's say all this got cleared out, we'd be able to run this get Inveigh command and do the NTLM v2 flag. And now we've got just nice clean output showing only the hash that we wanted. So this is awesome, right? We're able to capture these hashes like we could with responder. But what if we wanted to get a little bit crazy? Like, what if instead of taking this hash, because obviously now we could copy this whole thing out, we could throw it into Hashcat, and we could try to crack the password, right? Get the clear text equivalent. And I got a video on that about cracking it using Hashcat. That's part 2 of my LLMNR series. But what if I didn't want to actually take the time to crack it? What if I just wanted to like relay it someplace else? Well, we could try to do something like that. Now, this is where I think Inveigh falls short compared to a tool like Responder, where you could easily capture, just like in this scenario I showed you, if we were using Responder, we could then use NTLM Relay X to just forward that to whatever target we want to, authenticate over SMB, and as long as we have administrator rights from the captured user hash, we're able to actually get command execution. that in theory would work, except Inveigh does not support doing an SMB captured hash like this to an SMB, I guess, target, right? Or authentication over SMB to the target. I hope that makes sense. Um, Instead, it only supports it if we capture the hash over the HTTP proxy that they spin up. So what I mean by that is instead of going, doing this LLMNR attack with this fake share, let's say I were to open up like an actual browser and I don't remember what I said the IP address was, 10.0.1.200. And if I were to paste and go to that here, we get an authentication prompt. And then if I were to type in the credentials, which are K Bryant, password, which in this case just password 123, I think it is, press enter, nothing happens, right? But then if we come back to here, we weren't watching the output live, but if I run this again, notice we've got two hashes. We've got the one that we had before, and then now we've got this new hash that we just captured. Now, if we were to have Inveigh relay running, then we would be able to take this captured hash here, relay that to a target, and get command execution as long as this user has administrator rights on that target machine. I'll show you what I mean. So if we head back over to this blog post, down here, we've got this section about relaying captured hashes via the HTTP proxy. So what we're going to do is we need to start by actually importing the invoke relay or Inveigh relay module. And so if you're in that op directory or whatever, wherever you downloaded the Inveigh, I guess PowerShell stuff, and like if you do an ls, you'll see we've got these three different PSD files. So we already invoked this one, I believe. Now we're invoking that one. Or I guess I should say importing that one. And once that's imported, we now have the ability to do like invoke, inveigh, relay, right? And now we can actually run this command and do what we want. So I'm going to come down and there's quite a bit we can do with this. I'm just going to copy this whole command. I'm going to paste it in. It's going to give me an error. I'll just re-go up. It gave me an error because that target IP placeholder. But let's take a look at what this is doing. So we're saying, show me the console output, set that to yes, and then set our target here to whatever the target IP is that we specify. So we'll go through and we'll put that in a second, but then we also have this command flag and the command we want to execute through PowerShell. And so we're just going to run who am I as a quick proof of concept. And then you also can add this attack flag, because there's a few different attacks that can be performed with this. If you come back here, I detail them out a little bit, but if you wanted to, and I already have it up in this new window, you can just go ahead and Google, I think it's like GitHub Inveigh. If you come into this first result here, down they've got this wiki page, and if you go into the wiki, this explains much more about the tool. You also have some basics that show like some examples or whatever, and then you even have the parameters here that tell you exactly what they are, what their default value is, and then what they do. So definitely check out the wiki if you want to get more in depth about understanding Inveigh. But I'm going to use all three attack methods, which first is just going to enumerate information about the system. So this is going to pull down group, users, shares, try to show me just information about the system. Obviously, then we want to execute whatever command it is that we provide. And then it's also even going to do a session. And I don't play with this too much, so I don't really know what it does. But what I imagine it's doing is some sort of session where it creates and uses Inveigh as like a C2 or like a mini C2 server, right? So like think when you execute a interpreter shell on a system, you've got that session that gets established where then you can go and do other things like execute other commands or run other modules. I imagine this is kind of like a mini version of that. But I'd play with it if I were you, if that's something that interests you. Personally, I think I'd rather just use execute to execute and install like a Covenant, launcher or something like that, where I've got more power with a beefier C2. But let's just move on here. So we've got our command. Let's go figure out what our target IP is going to be. So if we come into my other machine, this is the victim, see what the IP address is. 10.0.1.11. So I'll copy that down and then we'll adjust our command. Bam. Okay. And I think we're good. I'm just going to hit enter here. And again, we might get a ton of output potentially if there's a lot of requests going on in the network, but we'll just run that to begin with. And then now this is our victim machine. And usually with relay attacks, you're not going to be able to take a captured hash from the victim and then relay it back to that same machine. I can't remember what the protections are, but usually there's protections in place that prevent that. So instead, I'm actually going to sign into my domain controller, which is this third machine now. And if we look at this, we can just do a quick who am I? And we can see, let me make this bigger for you guys. We'll do 28. So we can see we're running as this L James user. So we can just do a net user on L James, and we can see that I'm a part of the domain admins group, right? So in theory, if we capture the L James user hash, he's going to be domain admin. He's going to be able to execute commands on any machine. So this is definitely a high value target. Now, just to demonstrate, if I were to come in here and do like fake, like this, press enter, we're not going to get anything, right? We may actually be capturing his hash if we were doing the LLMNR listening, but we're not going to be able to relay that to the target that we're trying to. So instead, what we're going to use is the HTTP proxy. And again, this is just a downfall of using Inveigh. It doesn't have the ability to capture that SMB and pass it over SMB. But if we were to instead go to 10.0.1.200, which is the IP address of our attack server, and press enter, check this out. We already got something here. So we do see we got a GET request here, and it's showing us the user agent of what got connected. Let's go ahead and provide our credentials. Again, this is another downfall, right? Because you have this credential prompt. Depending on how the environment's configured, this may actually pass the credentials automatically. Like it might not prompt the user to actually type things in, but it is in our case. So I'm hoping I just type that password in randomly, say okay to this, and check this out. We've got a ton of stuff going on. Let's just let that run for a second. I'm going to scroll up and let's just dive in and look at what's going on. So we definitely have the GET and the user agent, right? We already looked at that. But now at this point, it says we're taking this HTTP to SMB relay, and that's being initiated. And it shows us even it got initiated by that 10.0.1.10. That's the IP address of my server that L James just authenticated from. Now it takes that challenge and it's going to capture the NTLM hash and it's going to send that over to whoever our target machine is, which in this case is 10.0.1.11. And it tells us that the authentication was successful. So L. James provided valid user credentials. And then it even tells us, cool, this guy has command execution privilege. He's an admin on that target machine. It adds a session to the list, and then it dumps out all this enumeration stuff. And that's because we added that attack enumerate flag. So we can see the administrator group list. So these are all the local admins that are on that machine. We can also see that domain admins are an administrator group. We can get details about the local user accounts, and then we can even see that there's a local share here called share. So that's the enumerate flag where it just enumerates details about it. It then says he does have command execution. The service got created, tried to execute our command, and it was successfully executed. Now, one thing I don't like about this is it doesn't actually show me the output of that command, right? The command was who am I, but I can't see the output. We know it's going to be running as L James. I guess it's potential that it could be running a system depending on how Inveigh works, but I can't see that, which I wish I could see the output. One thing we could test if we really wanted to get crazy is we could set the command to be like a ping and just ping ourselves, and then we could run like a TCP dump or have Wireshark listening, and we could see if we see those ICMP requests coming in. That could confirm that we do in fact have command execution. But in this case, I'm just going to trust it because we were able to successfully enumerate stuff. So I think you can imagine how much further we could take this, right? Like we could take command execution and do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. Again, I don't like the fact that you can only relay HTTP hashes that were captured. They're not HTTP hashes; they're still NTLM v2 hashes, but they were captured over that HTTP server, and I don't like that. I feel like that's not realistic to have. Like at least you're gonna have more often than not, you're going to capture hashes through like an SMB or LLMNR method. Now, on that note, I found this Twitter post that Kevin Robertson, he's the guy who created Inveigh, he mentioned that you may be able to block port 445 inbound, so that's your SMB service, you may be able to block that using like Windows Defender Firewall. And then by doing so, that could encourage Windows clients to, instead of trying to authenticate over SMB on your attack system, it's going to fail over, say, oh, well, SMB is not open. Let me try to use HTTP instead. And then that would enable you to perform the relay attack, right, from HTTP to SMB. Now, I don't know if that's going to work for you. It didn't work for me in my test environment, but it's worth a shot if you're in a pinch and you really need something to work there. So that's it. I hope you guys kind of learned something new from this one. It was definitely a lot of fun learning about other tools that are like Responder but aren't Responder. And it was a challenge having to just use Windows instead of using Kali Linux, because that's what I've spent all my time learning. So hopefully this was exciting for you. Again, if you like this type of content, please let me know. Leave a comment, hit the like button, and I'd love to see you around. So please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, see ya.